What's the good word, y'all? It's your boy DKB here. So Connor McGovern, maybe he took a bit of a truth serum. It's been few and far in between with Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh at the helm, but we've got some nuggets of information that I thought were pretty interesting out of Connor McGovern. Him thinking about his tenure going into his fourth year with the New York Jets so far. He mentioned how far this team has come from a team that struggled up until last year to just reach 7 wins to his earliest tenures where we got 2 and then 4 wins, I believe. So he's seen a little bit of everything, right? The complete breakdown. And to the point now where, we've gone from the youngest team in the NFL to mixing in enough veterans to, I think, put us in last place as the oldest team in the NFL right now. Not to say that the number's crazy. I think 27.9 or something like that years is the average age for the Jets. But nonetheless, he had some quotables that I thought was interesting and worth kind of breaking down a bit. So he mentioned it's been a complete 180. There's been some good players that have left, but also they've done a really good job of getting rid of the bad apples. And this is when I started really tuning in because, as I mentioned, Robert Saleh, he's done a very great job keeping this locker room intact. No breakage really whatsoever. The only situation that kind of got away from him and he was able to reel it back in an impressive fashion was the Elijah Moore situation. So for Connor McGovern, who doesn't speak a whole ton, but obviously is one of the veterans on the team who would know as much, especially for this new coaching staff, it was interesting to kind of see what his take on it was. He goes on to mention there's not, I don't know what you want to call it, a cancer, a bad apple, or somebody rotting the bucket in the locker room. Every single player in the locker room is a good person and a great football player. I think that's extremely important. And then to add to that, everyone is so talented. So he doesn't get into any more specifics than that in regards to who these so-called bad apples are or these football players that are rotting the bucket, as he mentioned. But it got me to thinking over the last 3 years, who are probably some of the top candidates, right? And I'm not so keen into player drama that I can, tell you guys every situation in the player and what was involved. But I'm familiar enough to at least give you guys a decent rundown, right? So let's think back to the last couple years. Now, I had to pull some interesting names out of here, and this will be more from a performance standpoint and probably this New York Jets media beating them down, which led to some quotables and comments and, debatable things that they may have said. But nonetheless, here we go. So one of the ones right off the top of the head, Denzel Mims, right? This has already kind of been acknowledged by himself as well as Robert Saleh, where he was raving about his maturity, how he's gone from handling this situation previously to where he feels like he's not really being involved or getting opportunities within the offense to where he's taking a back seat. He's just grinding it out under the tutelage of Corey Davis, and he's trusting in the coaching staff that if there's a will, there's a way that he will find the field. And to be fair, it might not have come the way we wanted it to and different things of that nature, but he did get his shots and he fumbled the bag. So definitely still hoping he can make something of his career, but we did have a small portion where he was looking like he would potentially cause a problem within his locker room, especially being envious of some of the receivers I'm sure he thought he was better than that was seeing the field over him. Our next guy, our offensive lineman, Greg Van Roten. This one is purely performance-based. I don't remember him ever saying anything negative, not to say it didn't happen. But I don't know a single Jets fan that was speaking positively about Greg Van Roten, and it definitely led to the media asking about him. One of the first guys that you started hearing the term turnstile for when it came to how he was getting beat religiously whenever he got lined up. And, I want to say it was Laurent Duvernay-Tardif that ultimately ended up replacing him, and it was a sigh of relief for all of us. But I'm sure while he was going in, the midst of dealing with everything, probably wasn't looking the best. And Connor McGovern would know best as, the guy directly to his left. One of the biggest play guys here, Le'Veon Bell. Now, this situation was doomed from the start, right? You have a head coach in Adam Gase, who we know by now was never going to work out in New York. But even for the guys that were hopeful, having your head coach automatically have a problem with your biggest free agent signing of the offseason is definitely a deciding factor that, things are going to go awry and go left extremely quick. We didn't see anything close to the same player that we've seen before. I would even argue he went on to see better success after he left the Jets, and that's probably just due to having a generally more positive attitude about where he was at that point compared to his experience with the New York Jets. So that is one I would definitely love to, get evaporated from my memory. I definitely remember being somewhat excited about it. Didn't love the price tag, but, even with him coming off that year of waiting, I expected that we were still going to get one of the better running backs in the NFL. So another sad story about a free agent getting a free bag from the New York Jets, barely needing to perform at even an average level, and us having to just, weep our tears in silence. Pierre Desir, the cornerback, I believe we picked him up as an option when we were throwing, darts at the walls, trying to see what could stick. Don't remember anything bad about him, and in fact, I think there was probably more positives than anything, even though he ultimately didn't work out. But again, just a name kind of pulling out of the hat. I just remember the name coming up in articles and stuff. Don't remember if it was positive or negative, but we'll see if anybody mentions anything. Same thing with Bradley McDougald. Remember him being part of the Jamal Adams trade. We thought we were still getting a pretty solid safety. Didn't work out for us for whatever reason, but definitely a trade we all still love. Felt like we won. Seemed like we got a great player as well as all of the great picks that Joe Douglas was able to finesse. But if you're Bradley McDougald, I can definitely understand, you being caught up in a surprise trade and then going to the New York Jets, where generally, prior to Joe Douglas coming, most free agents are going to end their career. Get a free bag, right off into the sunset. Doesn't really matter what's going to happen after that point. Jabari Zuniga, our third round draft pick, if I remember correctly, could be fourth round, but nonetheless, Joe Douglas came in. Jabari Zuniga had some kind of off-field incident. Don't remember the depths of it. I want to say it could have involved a gun, but Joe Douglas cut ties immediately. And that was kind of unheard of, right? You generally don't cut your draft picks a year, 2 years into what's going on unless things go extremely awry. So that was just kind of a wasted pick, again, by the franchise that hasn't drafted well since Joe Douglas arriving. And so it's great to see that we don't really have situations like that occurring for the New York Jets anymore. I mean, the closest we've come to it is our tight end in the 7th round, in Zach Kuntz being cut, but us being able to get him onto the practice squad. So some other names, I won't dive into the full situations, but Jarrad Davis, the middle linebacker project that we tried to, salvage from the Lions. We had, of course, our own Elijah Moore. Not necessarily the same situation as a Denzel Mims, but he essentially ran himself out of New York in kind of a selfish way. I still think, we don't know the entire story. I think Mike LaFleur definitely had a big part in it. But ultimately a guy that will probably go on to see great success in the NFL, but hate the way to see that things ended between us. Grant Herman's a tackle. Nobody's really going to be familiar with this guy, but I remember his name because there were multiple fights about 2 years ago that he was causing with players, not only on the defense, but the offensive side as well. There's a point of being scrappy and then taking that overboard. And so I'm not surprised that we ended up ultimately letting him go, although he's kind of hung around a little bit. We did have the James Robinson trade. We know how that went, kind of in a Denzel Mims boat where he wanted to see the field. Robert Saleh, didn't agree with the running style versus what our offense was capable of potentially doing. And, we took our shot hoping to get a decent Breece Hall replacement. Didn't work out with him. And then finally, Mike White. And this one was a little bit of, twisting the arm, of course, but I think more so not in that he was a negative guy, but the situation that got created with him and Zach Wilson, where obviously team members started low-key taking shots at Zach Wilson and his inability to look like an actual NFL quarterback. And then, of course, the hype that was coming with Mike White, the Hall of Fame game ball that he ultimately started things off with, and then coming into last year, ultimately ended with guys walking around wearing Mike White t-shirts. hyping up how great of a guy he is, where they feel like the offense can go with him as opposed to where it was going to go with Zach Wilson. And so hard to really try to mitigate and, avoid that whole situation for what it was, but still worth mentioning. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Is there a player that should have been on this list for you guys? And I'll catch you again. Peace.